As South Africa enters the first weeks of 2026, the nation is grappling with a series of catastrophic flooding events that have paralyzed major provinces, displaced thousands of families, and reignited a fierce debate over the government's failure to adapt to a rapidly changing climate. What began as a seasonal weather pattern has transformed into a humanitarian and economic emergency, revealing the fragile state of the country's infrastructure and the intensifying fury of the Indian Ocean's warming waters. The current crisis was triggered by a cut-off low-pressure system, a weather phenomenon that has become increasingly frequent and violent in the southern African region. Over the past 72 hours, parts of KwaZulu-Natal, KZN, and the Eastern Cape have received over 300 millimeters of rain, nearly triple the average monthly rainfall for January. The South African Weather Service, SAWS, has maintained a level 9 warning, the second highest possible, noting that the soil saturation levels from previous wet cycles have left the ground unable to absorb any further moisture. In the port city of Durban, the Mangeni River has breached its banks, sweeping away informal settlements and severely damaging the strategic M4 highway. As of Monday evening, official reports from the National Disaster Management Center, NDMC, confirm 58 fatalities, with 22 individuals still reported missing. However, local community leaders in townships like Umlazi and KwaMashu suggest the numbers may be much higher, as many remote dwellings were swallowed by mudslides under the cover of night. The displacement crisis is acute. Over 12,000 people have been forced into temporary shelters, many of which are overcrowded community halls and churches. We lost everything in 2022. We rebuilt, and now we have lost it all again, says Thandiwe Gumede, a mother of 4 whose home was destroyed in the Ladysmith flash floods. It is not just the water. It is the feeling that we are being abandoned to the elements. While the volume of rain is undeniably extreme, engineering experts argue that the scale of destruction is a result of years of maintenance debt. The failure of stormwater drainage systems, many of which are clogged with uncollected refuse or have not been upgraded to meet modern capacity needs, has turned suburban streets into raging torrents. In Johannesburg, the economic hub, the flash flooding phenomenon has crippled the electrical grid. Substations located in low-lying areas were submerged, leading to localized blackouts within blackouts, compounding the misery of residents already dealing with the nation's ongoing energy challenges. The logistics sector has also taken a massive hit. Transnet, the state-owned freight operator, has suspended rail services to the port of Durban, the busiest in sub-Saharan Africa, due to track washouts. This suspension threatens to choke the supply chain for the entire Southern African Development Community, SADC region, potentially driving up food and fuel prices. Climate scientists from the University of the Witwatersrand warn that these events are no longer once-in-a-century occurrences. The warming of the Agulhas Current in the Indian Ocean is providing more energy for storm systems, leading to more intense precipitation events. South Africa is a climate hotspot, explains Dr. Leonard Ndlovu, a climatologist. We are seeing a shift where the dry areas are getting drier and the wet areas are experiencing tropical-level deluges. Our urban planning is still based on 1970s weather patterns. We are building for a world that no longer exists. President Cyril Ramaphosa, in a televised address on Sunday night, declared a provincial state of disaster for KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. This move allows for the immediate release of emergency funds and the deployment of the South African National Defence Force, SANDF, to assist with search and rescue operations and the delivery of clean water. However, the political fallout is mounting. Opposition parties have criticized the slow pace of the Climate Adaptation Fund promised years ago. There are growing demands for accountability regarding the billions of rand allocated for flood relief in previous years, much of which was allegedly lost to corruption. Economists estimate the preliminary damage to be in excess of 15 billion rand, 800 million US dollars. Beyond the immediate repair costs, the long-term impact on the tourism industry and agricultural yields in the Eastern Cape, a major citrus and livestock hub, could dampen South Africa's GDP growth for the fiscal year 2026. Insurance companies are also signaling a shift. Premia in flood-prone areas are expected to skyrocket, leaving many low to middle-income homeowners unable to afford coverage, further deepening the socio-economic divide. As the rains begin to ease in the north but intensify in the Western Cape, the immediate priority remains the restoration of potable water and the prevention of waterborne diseases like cholera, which often follow such disasters. The 2026 floods serve as a grim reminder that for South Africa, the fight against climate change is not a future problem. It is a present-day battle for survival. The resilience of the Rainbow Nation is being tested once again, not by political strife, but by the relentless power of a changing planet. Meanwhile, the Republic of Mozambique is currently facing its most severe environmental catastrophe in a decade. As of mid-January 2026, a combination of a powerful tropical system in the Mozambique Channel and unprecedented inland rainfall has submerged vast swathes of the country, cutting off entire provinces and leaving hundreds of thousands of people in a desperate struggle for survival. The current crisis was precipitated by Tropical Cyclone Dina, which made landfall near the city of Vilanculo on January 14, 2026. While the cyclone brought destructive winds exceeding 170 kilometers per hour, it was the subsequent stationary rain that caused the most damage. Over the last 5 days, the central and southern provinces of Sofala, Gaza, and Inhambane have recorded over 500 millimeters of rain, surpassing the total expected for an entire summer season. Compounding the coastal devastation, heavy rains in neighboring Zimbabwe and South Africa have forced dam authorities to open floodgates along the Limpopo and Zambezi rivers. This has created a double squeeze effect, coastal surges pushing inland and riverine floods rushing toward the sea, leaving the coastal plains of Mozambique as a massive, inescapable basin. The National Institute for Disaster Management has confirmed a preliminary death toll of 112 people, though authorities warn this number is certain to rise significantly as rescue teams reach remote areas in the Zambezia province. An estimated 250,000 people have been displaced. In the city of Beira, which is still recovering from the scars of Cyclone Idai, 2019, the drainage canals have failed once again. The water didn't come from the sea this time. It came from the sky and the ground, says Maria dos Santos, a resident of the Munhava settlement. By midnight, the water was at our necks. We had to leave the elderly behind on rooftops. The humanitarian situation is reaching a breaking point. Temporary displacement centers are reporting severe shortages of food, mosquito nets, and clean drinking water. There are already confirmed clusters of cholera and malaria in the temporary camps, exacerbating an already fragile public health system. The north-south connectivity of the country has been effectively severed. The N1 highway, the lifeblood of Mozambique's economy, has been breached in multiple sections, particularly near the Save River Bridge. This has halted the transport of essential goods from the capital, Maputo, to the northern regions. The energy sector has also suffered. Electricity Mozambique has reported that dozens of substations are submerged, leaving over 1.5 million people without power. This blackout has hampered communication networks, making it nearly impossible for families to locate missing loved ones or for emergency services to coordinate airlifts. For a nation where over 70% of the population relies on subsistence farming, the timing of the floods is catastrophic. The January floods have washed away the primary maize and rice crops just weeks before the harvest. Initial satellite assessments from the Food and Agriculture Organization suggest that over 400,000 hectares of arable land have been destroyed. This loss predicts a looming food security crisis that will likely last well into late 2026, requiring a massive international food aid intervention to prevent widespread malnutrition. Climate scientists point to the 2026 Mozambique floods as a textbook example of climate injustice. Despite Mozambique contributing negligible amounts to global carbon emissions, it remains one of the most vulnerable nations to the heating of the Indian Ocean. The frequency of these events is accelerating, says Paulo Chifamba, a researcher at the Eduardo Mondlane University. We used to have a great flood once every 20 years. Now we are seeing life-altering floods every 2 to 3 years. There is no time for the soil to recover, and there is no time for the economy to rebuild. President Filipe Nyusi has issued an urgent international appeal for $250 million in emergency assistance. While the United Nations and the European Union have pledged initial support, there is a growing donor fatigue globally. The Southern African Development Community has begun deploying regional standby forces to assist with helicopter rescues, as much of the affected area is inaccessible by boat due to the high speed of the floodwaters. As the rain begins to subside in some southern districts, the focus is shifting to the invisible aftermath. The reconstruction of schools, clinics, and bridges destroyed in this week's events will take years. Furthermore, the psychological trauma of a population that lives in constant fear of the next rainy season is immeasurable. The 2026 floods have once again highlighted the urgent need for a permanent loss and damage fund for nations like Mozambique, which are on the front lines of a changing global climate. Meanwhile, the human cost of the recent floods across South Africa has been devastating. A second crisis is emerging in the form of a massive economic shock. As the floodwaters begin to recede in parts of KwaZulu-Natal, KZN, the Eastern Cape, and Gauteng, economists and government officials are beginning the grim task of quantifying the damage. Early estimates suggest that the total economic loss for the first 3 weeks of 2026 could exceed 25 billion rand, $1.35 billion, threatening the nation's fragile GDP growth recovery. The most visible loss lies in the country's physical infrastructure. The Department of Public Works and Infrastructure has noted that the 2026 floods have targeted the weakest links in the nation's aging systems. In the eThekwini municipality, Durban alone, over 140 bridges have been reported as either partially collapsed or structurally unsound. The repair bill for municipal roads is estimated at 4.2 billion rand. Strategic transport corridors connecting the port of Durban to the hinterland have suffered washouts. For a logistics-dependent economy, every day these roads are closed results in a loss of approximately 300 million rand in trade movement. The flooding has destroyed major water treatment plants in the south coast. Replacing this high-tech machinery is not just a financial burden, but a time-consuming one, as many components must be imported from Europe and Asia amidst a weakened rand. While the port terminals themselves have remained largely functional, the rail links operated by Transnet Freight Rail have been suspended due to mudslides on the tracks. This has created a backlog of over 10,000 containers,